Somebody could email the link.
I got on Joe.
You got
I
on?
had that problem getting on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the presentation to start, but I've got both.
But Roy 207, Roy 20.
It's Roy
I
S.
just copied
027.
it from the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Copy, paste, and hit enter.
Yep. Should be
You're
okay.
going the highly sophisticated way. Okay.
Yes, I did copy
the
paste.
less
High
error
tech.
prone method.
High tech.
Good.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, no worries at all. All right, so way back in 2008, traditional organization, very traditional organization, lots of waterfall going on, lots of silos, not necessarily a very mature IT function. They're primarily a finance company, not a product company. So, like an IT product company. So you understand how the organization was back then. Now, they started going down a journey where they were trying to get more business interaction, but still very, very siloed. And that was in 2009. 2010 is when they decided we're going Agile. Unfortunately, it was Agile in name only, doing daily stand-ups, maybe doing some sprints. We're doing Scrum, so we're Agile, that kind of thing. Well, we were all very familiar with that kind of practice. Not the best results. They invested a fair bit into it, but they really weren't getting the results they were looking for. 2011, they decided, we're doing it. We're going all in. We're going all Agile. So their CIO got involved and they said, yep, this is the direction that we're going. So didn't go so great. The reason they decided to do it is because everybody else was doing it. And we've seen that kind of a goal before. If everyone else is doing it, somebody must be onto something. So we're going to go Agile as well. Faster, better, cheaper, that kind of stuff. So toward the end of 2011 into 2012, they decided to bring some coaches on to improve their practices, jump-started the teams, still doing Agile, didn't really change any cultural aspects, just following the practices. Well, just like a lot of organizations, they moved on a couple of years, a new CIO, some new leadership came into play, and they said, no more Agile. So it went back again to waterfall, started reestablishing their PMO, much more heavier governance, lots of toll gates, all kinds of good stuff. So they went back to the way things used to be. Backslid all the way back again. So what happened was back in 2019, they had started practicing again, doing it in pockets and silos, really not so great. They decided to bring me in to do a 2-day training session. So I did the training, and they realized as part of that training that they had not realized the benefits from doing Agile. They had been following and practicing, but they still weren't getting the real benefits. So that was when they had that aha moment. They realized, we've got to invest more money. We've got to invest a lot of time, and we've got to go figure out how to do Agile properly if we expect to get any return on the investment that we've made. So that's when they started their Agile transformation in earnest. Now, fast forward, that was 2020 was when they really kicked it. That's only 1 year ago. And they have made dramatic strides since then. We're going to talk about some of the things that they've done in just a bit. But before we do that, I would like to take a poll. So now, poll everywhere should be available to you. If you could answer this question, what is the current state of your transformation? So you can give it a shot and see what it looks like. There we go. We're getting some answers.
Is the bottom one the end of the road?
Yeah, the last one is it's the exactly. So it starts off with not so much Agile at all, starting to do some piloting, and the very last one is culture change, business teams. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Full Agile culture. Okay. We'll give it a few more seconds, and we'll shut it down. All right, I think we got everybody. Let's stop the timer. Oop, maybe not. Okay, good enough. So kind of interesting. Actually, kind of what I expected from especially coming in the chart space. Looks like the majority of folks still a lot of waterfall sitting out there, which is really kind of interesting. I'm happy to see though that there's a significant 13% of the folks that are on this call. You've got a fully Agile organization. That's impressive. Really kind of surprising. Interesting stuff. Cool. Thank you for taking the poll. All right, let's move on. So just wanted to do a little bit of recap. So this was an important slide for the Agile organization. We actually presented this slide to the C-suite when we first started. And basically what we're trying to show them is that what they have been practicing to start, what they're doing right now is just the tip of the iceberg. They're doing the practices, they're doing stand-ups, user stories, all the normal stuff that most organizations start with. But the challenge is it's not nearly enough. They need more. Most companies, unfortunately, kind of stop at this level, that doing Agile kind of concept. And what we want to do is we want to take it further. And this is what really sold the organization. So we wanted to focus on the values and the principles. Principles being things that kind of govern how we act, right? Our behaviors, business partnership, business engagement, alignment, MVP concepts, products over projects. We're going to talk a lot more about that one in just a little bit. Capacity-based funding. So rather than project funding, instead funding people, right? Rather than funding the work. Stable self-organizing teams. You get the idea. And primarily focusing on value, focusing less on projects, in fact, getting rid of projects altogether, and focusing instead on delivering value in a continuous stream. Now, that's still not enough, though. If you want the real change to happen in your organization, this is where we want to get to. And this is where the Carlyle is really starting to take some significant strides. So these are the values, the qualities or standards of our behavior. So things like continuous improvement. These are cultural changes, the culture of experimentation, transparency and openness, which is really hard to get to, shared responsibility and accountability, empowerment driven, team over individual. And that does not necessarily mean individuals don't matter, but simply that the team is focusing on team goals, not just individual goals. And this one is actually really important too. Risk recovery over risk avoidance. And put it into context, the Carlyle Group is a private equity firm. They're risk averse, as most financial companies are. They're very heavily risk averse. So switching them to more of a risk recovery kind of stance away from a risk avoidance is a very dramatic change for them. The primary thing here is outcome over output. And I want to temper this one down. You hear this one a lot. Outcome over output. It kind of implies that output's not important. And that's not really what we're saying here. Output obviously is important. The way that we want to put this in perspective is that output is kind of a leading indicator of success. The outcome are the lagging indicators. So the output is kind of subordinated. It's going to potentially make you successful, but you're not successful until you get the outcomes. So a heavier focus on trying to produce the right stuff and get the right return rather than just producing a whole bunch of stuff. That's really what we're looking for. Now, let's move on to where we are now. That was all the stuff that we did in our history. So we made some really good strides since the last time that we did the presentation. So the first thing that we started out with, and we put a really heavy emphasis on this, was starting with goals and objectives. So since we moved away from projects, and we're going to talk about that more in a bit, we moved away from projects and instead we're focusing on goals, objectives, outcomes. So you start with defining the problem. What is it that we're trying to achieve as an organization? So we'll talk more about that. We went to like an OKR kind of process. So objectives and key results. So it's more business-focused outcomes, business-focused objectives.
So these are not Agile goals and objectives. These are business goals and objectives.
Exactly. Agile is a mechanism to help us get there, but they're business goals and objectives, right? As part of that transformation. Now, moving on to the next part, value and not projects. So we completely eliminated projects, and we actually did that within the first 9 months of the transformation. They decided projects were no longer valuable. And this was an incredibly big move, very bold move for them. The move away from projects meant that we could change our budgeting model. We could stop focusing so much on dates, stop so much focusing on budgets, and instead focusing on value. It forces the conversation about prioritization, constant prioritization, always making sure that we're working on the right stuff. I'm sure you've experienced this in your organizations where you're working on this big project, but you can't deliver something else because you're in the middle of some other project and that project has to be completed. Well, the question you should ask yourself is, if something else is more important and more valuable to the organization, shouldn't you be working on that instead of working on the less important stuff that's part of this other project? So it forces the prioritization discussion that you're always looking at the most valuable stuff and sometimes stopping what you're working on because it's not as important as something else that's eventually come up. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to encourage everyone, if you have questions, shout them out, ask them. Let's have some questions along the way. Any questions so far about that topic? That's a big one. That's a big topic.
Well, you reminded me of the saying that we have: stop starting and start finishing.
It's exactly what that is.
Okay. And do you guys use that phrase, or did they use that phrase?
I certainly used it over and over and over again, and it's adhering to the organization. So their view is they're not great at it yet. So I don't want to say that they're perfect at this yet, but they have made a significant improvement in deprioritizing things, and so they will work on fewer things of higher value, and not start things that aren't due yet. So they're getting much better at that. There are, of course, pockets where that still hasn't taken hold, but they're getting a lot better at it. Did that make sense, Joe?
Yeah. Yep.
Roy, on a similar line and a predicament that this particular team is looking at too, and is when you have operational elements that are the bread and butter that are becoming less important, so you need to focus more on the new initiatives that are more important. How are they creating the? I don't want to say compromise, but how they are making sure that both of them are contained, right? How do you kind of lead them into value there? Because that is what most of the big firms are suffering from, right? Because they're afraid of stopping their operational things or reducing impetus on it, and use that as an excuse to not do the right things. Right?
Yeah. So I'll talk about this in more depth in a couple of slides, but the basics of what they did was percent allocation of capacity or velocity if you're using Scrum, right? So they just did like a peanut butter layer of we're going to take X percent of our capacity every sprint, and that's going to be for operational issues or technical debt or things that we need to do to keep the platform stable. And the rest of it was dedicated for future strategic kinds of things and enhancements and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
One thing that was really important was that we didn't build separate operational teams and production support teams. Operations support were in the teams building product. And that was a really important issue because we didn't want to have those separate teams that were disconnected from the value stream work. We wanted to make sure that everyone was involved in supporting the work and building new stuff. So you had less knowledge transfer challenges and less documentation needs. So it was one team that would do everything, but they would carve out the capacity to be able to accommodate it. Does that make sense?
And yeah, I think like for small to mid-size organizations, that is perfectly executable, right? Like where I think where we saw problems with bigger corporations was this territorial borderlines between those things where they wouldn't allow that to happen, right? And that is a challenge about 90% of the audience deals with when most of them are funded and running in big organizations, right? And I don't know an easy answer, but it kind of, I think it boils down to leadership. But if any tips are there for pushing it towards those organizations, please share.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Certainly, there are times when leadership might push to tap into that percentage, that layer of peanut butter there. But the teams are pretty good at resisting that. So they've gotten better, not perfect, but they've gotten better at allocating, keep the lights on kinds of things. And there's more information that we'll talk about in a couple of slides that'll help see how we achieved that as well.
Great. All right. Thanks, sir.
All right. If you don't mind, let me move on and we can ask some additional questions.
Wait a minute. I want to ask one more question, man. I'm not sure.
Go for it.
Maybe there's a better time, but you use the word self-organizing teams, and stable I love, and cross-functional, of course. But the new Scrum guide talks about self-managing teams, whatever the hell that means.
Yep.
And so do you feel like they've addressed that issue of self-managing teams?
Yeah, I think they have, at least from the standpoint that they don't have a manager on each team, right? So it's sort of a matrix style organization, if that, using an older term. The team manages itself. They organize their own work. They don't have a manager on the team. They don't necessarily have a designated lead on the team. They have that natural leadership. So I would suggest that, they're probably handling that, whatever self-managing means to the organization, but they're pretty good at that, actually. Did that make sense, Joe?
Yeah. Okay, good.
Awesome.
Okay.
So another quick aspect of the self-organizing teams, moving on to that topic. There was also a concerted effort to convert contractors, right? They had a very heavy contractor ratio. And they recognized that using contractors, it was very difficult to build stable teams. It was also very difficult. There was a mindset that if you're a contractor, we don't want to invest in training you. We don't want to do any cross-functional. So the cross-functional capabilities of the team were significantly restricted because of the contractor ratios. So by hiring those folks and using fewer contractors, it reduced that mindset and also allowed them to do cross-training. That helped in that they were then able to have a truly cross-functional, not just all skills on the team, but people having those T-shaped skills, where people were able to have the deep skill set in their specialty and also step out of their specialty. And that was viewed as okay by the organization because they weren't just all contractors. So much better in that space. Still, again, not perfect, but much, much better than where they were. Next one was a big jump, and this was budget by team. So what they basically do is instead of budgeting for projects and allocating dollars toward projects, instead you have a budget for the teams. How many people do we have? And you allocate the funds to make sure that those people stay employed. Then from there, if you remember, there's a pretty famous diagram from the DSDM, the Dynamic System Development Methodology, of the upside down triangle, right? You've got the triple constraints of scope and budget and schedule. In Agile, we have the upside down triangle: fixed schedule, fixed budget, and variable scope. So by budgeting by team, you can get a fixed budget, a fixed schedule of 1 year, and then you determine what scope you can fit within that. So throughout the year, it forces again the discussion of prioritization rather than about dollars. The dollars are already allocated. You don't have to go for more money. Money is not the issue. It's always about what is the most important thing to work on. So it tends to encourage the concept of deprioritizing work that's not necessary, because if the company really wants something, they can have it, and it's not a dollar discussion, it's a deprioritization discussion, right? And that leads us on to our next one, prioritization. Not so great here yet. They're getting better. They're having conversations at a much higher level now, where there's it's really kind of funny to watch the behavior. Some of the folks in the team will say, well, we need to get this done by a certain date, and senior leadership is saying, well, why? It changed the dynamic. Now leadership is saying, tell me what we don't have to work on. Let's discuss this stuff. I would rather you work on fewer things. And this is coming from people like their CFO. So instead of going to the CFO for more money, the CFO is saying, do less stuff. So it's changed the conversation, which I found fascinating. I was really happy to see the CFO change his language to be more about deprioritization. Last point on this slide is business engagement. And I'm not talking about just the businesses engaged with the teams and product owners on the teams are business representatives, which they are. They have real product owners in this space. It's also now that the business is reaching out to the Agile COE to form business teams. So teams of business folks using Agile practices in order to do their work as well. So it's no longer just a pure IT function, which is dramatically different. And that's a major, major improvement over the past 9 months. Okay, let me pause there. Any questions so far?
Roy, recollecting the first session that you held, and I think there you defined work as not just technology work, right?
Yeah.
You said that there were projects that were both technical and more on the business disruptions too, which were happening. Okay, so after that, they took this long for engaging the business into Scrum?
No, so it wasn't engaging the business into the technology Scrum teams, but that was done back then. It was this is instead the business is now seeing, hey, we need to onboard a new investor, right? Something like that. Got it. So let's build a business team around investor onboarding with few, if any, technical components to it. Does that make more sense?
Right. Yeah, I was a bit confused when I was relating it to the last conversation, the first presentation, right? So that seemed a little off.
Yeah, big distinction, technology versus just getting work done, right? And so we're building Agile teams around the business functionality, right? Which is pretty cool. And in some cases, it's a bigger combination where they might have an IT component on a business team. So they'll have some folks on the team that can help with the technology options as well. But that's it's not as often, right?
Got it. Yeah, no, perfect. Makes sense. Thank you.
So
other
I just had a question on your self-organizing teams.
Yeah.
They decide who's on the team, or are they assigned to a team?
Originally, they were assigned to a team. So that was part of the team formation. And quite honestly, they weren't awesome at that because they were primarily assigning people based on their technical skills. And they really weren't thinking about the behavioral aspect of people in the team. So there was, in the earlier days of their transformation, earlier meaning like 9 months ago or so, they had some conflict that they had to figure out, right? Some people just didn't get along, and there was a lot of movement going on around about, based on people not being able to work together, that kind of thing. But now they've gotten a lot better. We're starting to talk about the next steps, which we should have done a long time ago. And that is making sure that as people are being hired, they're hired not just on their technical skills, but on their behavioral soft skills as well. That should have happened earlier, but the organization wasn't ready for it. Did that make sense, Ken?
Yep. Thank you.
Sure.
So Roy, you talk about value, not projects.
Yes.
So have they implemented some sort of value stream analysis and approach on that?
They're doing a lot more. They're doing a lot more value stream analysis. They're doing value stream mapping as well. The business has reached out to the Agile COE to facilitate value stream mapping processes, which is awesome. I'm really happy that they're doing that. Still not great at determining value across different business areas, right? Because what one business area views as valuable may not necessarily be as valuable to another business area. So they're still working out the criteria to say across the organization. And that's one of the next steps we want to do is build an organization where you could reallocate capacity of teams to a different area of the organization as long as they have the technical skills to do so. So that's where we want to get to. But in order to do that, we also have to have some common criteria for what value actually means. And it's a little bit difficult for them to get there. Did that make sense, Neil?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the follow-on question is, why are they finding it difficult?
Politics.
That is okay.
Pure politics.
Politics. The classic. Okay.
Yeah, that's the only reason. It's not a difficult thing to do when you really think about it.
No, it isn't. I mean, that's it. But it has to be politics. It's the root of all evil.
It is. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Right, just a question, so traditionally when we look at the way value streaming is done is based on whoever is touching that value being created towards a customer. And that's where we face the politics, the territories and other stuff where people either claim or want to be in everything, right? So one of the things that, in a similar experiment with a small firm, what we're trying is when they gave the organizational mapping, like, the boxes and lines connecting the org structure, basically, right? The boxes and the pyramid structure. So when they gave it, in order to reverse it, the experiment that we had them do for value stream mapping was not typically the ones prescribed, like, the SAFe and other things, because we knew what happened. So what we did was, we did the opposite. We said, create a customer offering or segmentation and tell that who are all grouped under this customer value creation, right? So it's more like put the customer in the audience, and if you had to claim the value you have delivered, who all are there in that group, and we asked them to reorganize themselves. So it kind of became an inverted pyramid, or it kind of changed shape totally, with leaders totally being absent and enabling. But I wanted to check notes with you to see if that is a right way to kind of look at value streaming, or what difference did you do, and what works better?
Yeah, absolutely. That can work. Let me just go back to or clarify a point that I was making about the politics. And unfortunately, the politics are baser than that. Some of the politics involved leaders are being measured a certain way. Successful delivery of certain value stream items, things like that. So if they're being measured for successful delivery of something, obviously that's going to be the most important thing in the world to them. So there's an HR and personal gain, personal need component to these politics. That's frankly getting in the way of really good prioritization. So that's why one of the next big things that we need to approach in this organization is revamping how people are there you go, Tom.
Rewarded,
reevaluating how people are rewarded, right? It's especially in the leadership space because they have such control over the prioritization. So that's kind of where I was getting to. Okay.
Okay. So I think we are probably in good shape. What we did is we engaged the HR in actually doing this exercise, leading this exercise with us. So the pyramid is forgotten, but yeah, maybe I need to catch up with you offline to go deeper. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, happy to. All right, cool. If you don't mind, let me move on.
Roy, I had one question.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
You mentioned moving agile, starting to see it in some of the quote business areas. Is this within the enterprise of Carlyle, or is it including the portfolio companies themselves? And could you give an example of something like that?
Yeah, just within the enterprise. They're really, it's for this organization, it's very difficult to do that outside of the organization. Often their business partners are private firms or private individuals. They're investors largely that they're working with. In some cases, they're downstreams. Vendors, certainly, they can extend it out, but that's not really the case here with the business case. So an example, a really simple example, their marketing organization. So there's really very little IT component other than perhaps, some CRM and some other kind of activities. Their marketing organization, it's a group of about 10 people, including external vendors, people that are doing like, the ad campaign kind of folks, the marketing companies. They are together on a Kanban team, and they're building out their marketing plans using kind of an agile marketing manifesto. Kind of go out on the net. You can see the Agile Manifesto for marketing, right? They're making use of that. It's 99% of the team is business folks, and they have one technical person on the team to help them understand what technology is available in the organization to help them with their business processes. Does that make sense?
It's great. I was going to ask you, just when they deprioritize something, is there a celebration like a okay, we learned something, we're going to shut this down? It doesn't mean the team are casualties. What is the culture around deprioritizations at some work?
Yeah, it's still not a celebration, and I would love them to do that. And I'd love them to celebrate failures, but they're not quite ready for that. It's like, whoo, we failed, that kind of thing. But they're just not at that point yet, right? They're not quite at the fun level, They're having fun, but not quite at that point. I wish they would, and I think that's a great idea, Mike. All right, cool. Let's move on. Okay, real quick, a couple of quick wins that we got. So the business teams, awesome stuff. Really happy the business is taking off. The budgeting by capacity, not by work, is a huge dramatic shift in the organization. Let's face it, dollars drive decisions, dollars drive politics and behaviors, all kinds of stuff. So instead, by allocating funds for the organization rather than just for individual pieces of work, it's a major shift in the communication. A major shift is about the deprioritization that we talked about, focusing on what not to work on rather than I need it immediately. Instead saying, I don't need this now, more implementing kind of a cost of delay kind of concept where we're focusing more on what does it cost us to not do this, or at least not do this now. And that's having a major impact on starting fewer things. And that's a big challenge that most organizations have. They start everything, but it takes so long to get everything done. We've all gone through the work in process, right? That's what that's all about. Stop starting, start finishing. Starting fewer things, finishing more things is a major shift on the organization. Now, something I'm going to talk about in 2 slides from now, measuring. Lots of metrics, but we wanted to be very, very careful how we rolled out the metrics because they can be abused like crazy. So we started out with very simple metrics, not just measuring teams, which was obviously important, but also measuring the effectiveness of the stuff that was being produced. So we implemented KPIs for each of the chunks of value or capabilities, if you want to call them that. Each of the capabilities that were being implemented, we implemented KPIs to say, are we actually going to get the return that we're expecting out of this business thing that we've produced? And they're starting to get some measurable results out of that. Obviously, they're lagging indicators and sometimes very significantly lagging indicators. So they're collecting that data and they're starting to do some analysis of it. But that's kind of lagging, and they're getting a lot better at that. So let me jump in and talk about something that was painfully difficult. So when we made the shift away from project funding, we then moved to a different budgeting process. And back in November, this was the thing that I was really waiting for to do an update with this audience. We did another budgeting process now that the budgeting, or another budgeting season now that the budgeting process had changed. Now, this is what should have happened, and I'm going to describe what actually happened and lessons that we learned from it. The way that budgeting is supposed to work with this kind of a process is that you simply start with where you were last year. So if you spent $50 million last year on all of your teams, then that would be your starting point for what you're willing to spend this year, right? So you're focused more on a delta kind of process. So the view is, are you happy with the output that you got? Do you need more capacity? If you need more capacity, cool. Let's perhaps hire some more teams, build some more teams out, and then you would increase your funding to accommodate the additional capacity. Or if the environment has changed or you need less capacity, maybe you shed a team, right? So that you can reduce your funding, doing it that way. The other aspect would be, do you need to shift funding? So in some cases, you might have a part of the organization where they believe they're spending more money than they should, and maybe we should be shifting some dollars over to a different part of the organization, and potentially shift a team over to the other space, as long as they have the right skill sets and domain knowledge and things like that. We want to get to the point where we can shift teams around a little more freely, but that's kind of hard based on skill sets. And then what you do is you take the data that you've accumulated over with your metrics and things like that, validate that, and then finalize it and refine it, that sort of thing. Refine and continue to refine it quarterly. So that's the way it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be a very simple process, just analyzing the delta of where you were last year and where you want to be this year. Unfortunately, they fell back into some old practices. So it became more about, hey, I've got this thing that I need to do. And it started to turn into, unfortunately, more of a project-focused discussion. It turned into discussions about the work. And it kind of devolved a little bit. So it was a pretty painful process. This kind of a process where you're doing it a simple, budgeting delta kind of process is easy to do. Going the project route, it took significantly longer. It took us a full month to get through the annual budgeting process. So big lessons learned here. Keep the work out of this. Try to keep the politics out of it. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be shifting away from an annual budgeting process into more of a rolling quarterly budgeting process. What's interesting with this organization is that they already do quarterly adjustments to their budgets. So what we're going to do now, and we're actually going to be entering our end of quarter budgeting process very shortly, we're going to be shifting away from the annual process and just make adjustments along the way throughout the year. And those adjustments are largely going to be, do we need to shift dollars from one organization to another and shift the work around to different teams? Hopefully that's going to fix a lot of the challenges that we faced in this annual budgeting process, and it should be easier and easier. Our goal is to have annual budget or quarterly budgeting be really straightforward. It's a waste of money, the amount of time they spend doing budgeting. We'd really prefer for it to just be, here's the data, here's where we should be spending our money, this is where we're planning on investing this quarter, so start shifting funds around that way. So let me pause on that one. That was kind of a high-level view of some challenges that we faced. Any comments or questions about that?
Well, did they spend 2 months the previous year doing the budgeting?
It was, so this year, so November, this last budgeting process was easier than they had done previously.
So it's a win.
It was a win. I'll take the win.
The glass is not half empty. The glass is half full.
Yeah, the difference is that I was not involved in the annual budgeting process the previous year. I was in this one, and I hated it. So I felt the pain. So it was my pain that I experienced.
Yeah, and I'm sure it could be better, but
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you also got to look at it as well. We're learning how to do it, and we did it, a lot better than we did last time, and
Yeah.
it could be better the next time.
Yep, exactly. And if you look at it, the previous year, most of the discussions were about what work we were going to work on. And then they had discretionary funding and all kinds of weird stuff where they had extra millions of dollars they could tap into. And it was really kind of all fuzzy logic anyway. Shifting to the way that we did it this year, it was more, here's your number. This is our target number. And it's no different than where we were last year. So the work that we're going to do, we're just going to reduce the scope to fit within those numbers. So it was a lot easier. But they still said, but we have all of this other stuff we've got to work on. So we really should be getting more money. And it became fiefdom. That's really what it devolved to, right?
So what happens if you have to, or maybe you haven't faced this, what happens if you go, we don't need to do as much? How do you decide on what teams get rid of?
Yeah, Ken, that actually was a discussion, and that led to some other really interesting stuff, which was, we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides. So there was one part of their business space. I'm not going to say what part it was, so I don't get myself in trouble, right? There was one part of their organization that was very heavily loaded with people, funding, and it was not necessarily a profit area. It was more of a support area, right? And it was they looked at the dollars and they just didn't really make a lot of sense. They weren't spending the money in the growth areas where they should have. They were instead spending money in the maintenance and support areas. Now, it's not that those areas weren't important. They absolutely were, but it was significantly overloaded. So they decided in that space that that area had their funding cut significantly, like by probably a good 20%. And instead of just saying, we're going to remove 20% from the overall budget, we said, we're going to take that 20% and we're going to spread it to those other growth areas that it makes more sense to be spending money there. And there were some areas that said, you know what, we don't need any money. We're fine just maintaining where we are. So they didn't ask for additional funding. In fact, they were able to actually give a few dollars up, which was nice. And it didn't mean that they weren't losing anything, which was really helpful. So naturally, you can imagine the politics that happened with that, right? Giving dollars up or being cut. It's like, wait a minute, I have all these people to protect. No, you don't. Those people are going to be shifted to another business area. So, right? So that was the discussion, and it was a really powerful discussion and painful, and it's exactly the discussion that should have happened.
So did they shift the people, or did they fire people and hire new people?
No, they shifted the people, and unfortunately, these were the folks that they shifted were not contractors; they were employees. So they said, we're going to shift you over, and they had skill sets that were applicable to the other business areas. They just didn't have the domain knowledge. Yeah. So they shifted them over and gave them the opportunity to be trained in a new business space, which was a very positive thing. Now you've got employees that have broader business knowledge, and it actually allowed them to grow a little bit. It was painful. I mean, don't get me wrong, that was a painful thing, but it was really valuable.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on.
Quick, I'm sorry.
Okay, Joe.
I've seen this shift in the budgeting process be very important for a lot of. I'm thinking particularly of my examples are all financial companies, and they typically think of, if I control the money, I control the universe. But I think that this budgeting thing would affect non-financial companies almost as much. Does anybody have a comment about that?
Good question.
If you were Lowe's, if you were whomever, any other kind of non-financial company, sooner or later you're going to get this budgeting thing, I think. And then once you can get over this, it's going to help you be more agile. Does that make sense, Michael, to you? Or anybody in your experiences? Not a confirmation, but not a disagreement either.
Maybe, Joe, can you rephrase the question with an example? I think people might not be able to correlate.
So all I mean is that we often start Agile. We don't address this budgeting issue. We still budget the same old way. We're budgeting projects, and then they want to track that they get the value for the projects and all that kind of crapola. And then once we bite the bullet and change it from funding projects to funding teams, it makes a big difference in how well you can do Agile in the company. And I've seen that more with financial companies. Maybe that's just that I work with them more or happenstance. I don't know. But I suspect that culturally, it might affect financial services companies, whatever, a little bit more. But I suspect that it would be beneficial for almost any kind of company to make that shift, and that most companies do it the old-fashioned way. They fund projects and that kind of thing.
Right.
So Joe, I can. Go ahead, Morelli. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. And in empathizing with the folks on the call overall, right? And this has been the problem we have faced most of the career in this transformations and stuff, is that when a Scrum Master or a coach is engaged, usually in a larger organizations, the decisions of the finance and things happen at a different plateau where we are not even aware of, and we are brought in later only for what I call it as execution agile, right? And that is one of the problems for us is how do you kind of position yourself to have a seat at the table where those decision impacting the team's work happens, and be engaged quick enough at that level so as to you can bring the transformation quick enough, right? And that's probably one of the reasons where these things are more successful in smaller organizations than in the bigger ones. And I think that kind of answers the silence during this topic with the organization, you know, that,
Yeah,
and I could empathize with that.
yes. That makes sense. Okay, I'm sorry, Roy. That was a bit of a digression.
Oh, no worries at all. And just to add to that, Joe, I can speak about a client, one of my other clients at I'm not going to give the name, but it's a very large network equipment vendor, you know, a very, very large network equipment vendor. They had actually already done this several years ago, where they still used projects, but they didn't fund projects. So in their mode, a lot of these challenges had already gone away. So they really weren't worried about where they're spending money and things like that. They were looking at it more as an investment perspective. We're going to invest capacity into these areas of our organization. And it worked really, really well for them. So it's not just finance companies. At least I can talk about that one specific customer of mine. It worked very, very well for them as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not at all. This is not a particular industry kind of thing. I think it just works in general. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this, how we're refining our prioritization process. So they're still not great at this, but they're getting better at this concept, shifting more toward a cost of delay method for prioritization, rather than looking at, you know, I want this, I need this, so give it to me, which is typically how projects get started. Instead, looking at it as what's the value, what's the urgency, what's the cost, looking at a few different factors, cost of delay kind of concept. Now, the way that have been working with this organization to do this, let's just take a look at the little matrix on the left. I love using this little 2x2 matrix or 3x3, whatever works for you. The basic concept here is value and urgency. So you've got one axis for value, another axis for urgency, and you can color code the items, the features or capabilities that you're implementing based on the cost, right? So, you know, high red, high cost. So you can kind of visually see in kind of 3 dimensions what the value, the urgency, and the cost of the items are. The value that we get out of this kind of a visual is that people can see relative value, relative urgency, relative cost, rather than just seeing it in a spreadsheet and numbers, which are really hard to interpret. So it's a more visual representation of what's important and what's not, right? And it forces some really important discussions, less about the things that they agree on and more about the things that they don't agree on. So they can do all those little arguments and discussions on those things as, hey, I think my thing's more important, and they're doing it in a public forum with some pretty senior leaders to call, you know, to say, no, your stuff is more important this time. Your stuff might be more important next time. So we do this in multiple stages. One is each business domain does it on their own, and then it gets reviewed with a larger audience so they have the opportunity to see it across the enterprise. Still not great because there are still lots of politics involved in value, but at least they get the visual, and we're trying to take the dollars out of it. And so it's just the visual relative sizing and value and urgency. Now, as part of this process, it doesn't just stay this way. It's got to be constantly refined. So we have a regular cadence, and this cadence may change over time. It probably should change over time, where we do monthly replanning as there's new things come in, more of a tactical kind of thing. So month by month, you're kind of looking at those tactical changes where maybe something didn't get done or some new thing came in that has to happen, but it's typically pretty tactical. Then we do quarterly business reviews. This is an area where I think we can vastly improve as an organization. The QBRs are supposed to be goal-oriented. Are the goals still appropriate, or do we need to evolve our goals? Right? Does that kind of make sense? And so it's really the tactical of what we're doing on the month by month applied to the goals, the goals that we set up across the organization, and are they still aligning, and are the goals still valid, right? Because goals can change over the course of a year. So we want to move away. Last year they decided to do annual goals, and now we're moving toward more quarterly, right? It's the annual goals are more of just a direction, and the quarterly goals it just basically allows it to shift those goals across the year, which goals change, right? They change a lot more frequently than they used to. So that's kind of the idea. All right.
Okay. Did you also say, I think you did, that they are starting to measure business outcomes in
Yes.
in a measurable way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's what I
In
thought
their
it-
case, the metrics that they chose in many cases are significantly lagging, because you can imagine a lot of these
Yep,
things
yep.
are investment based,
Yep.
and an investment may not come to fruition for quite a long time,
Yes.
right? Not all of it, of course. So they have some that are a little bit faster, and that data is coming in, but the longer term KPIs, they're still evaluating that data. So they're getting better at it. It just takes time to evaluate that data.
So I would guess from my own experience that some people try to make their projects look better
Yep.
by kind of, I'll use the phrase, gaming the numbers.
Yep.
But
Vanity
when
metrics.
you start to measure outcomes, you start to realize, oh, you guys are always BSing us.
Yes.
And these other guys, when they say it's going to be XYZ, it turns out to be XYZ.
Yes.
So is that starting to feed back into the process?
That's exactly the intent, and it is starting to feed in. It's still somewhat early, but it's the intent would be, you said you were going to get this, and it's not like, oh, you were off by $500 and we're still going to beat you up. It's more, generally we're going in the right direction. That's really what we're looking for. So we want to feed that back in to see where we're completely out of whack in our investment, right? So if they invest significantly in a particular area because some business person said, I can make lots of money here. Well, great. Did you actually make the money that you expected, right? Within reasonable thresholds. And if it's not moving the needle in the right direction, well, obviously we didn't do a good job of those. We had some bad assumptions or something went wrong. What do we do next time to improve our investment strategy?
You want to read that?
Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right, cool. Any other questions? Current work from home environment has warmed some of the larger companies up the mindset of focusing on outcomes. Interesting question, Tom. Yeah, sorry, in the chat window. Sorry.
I'm not sure if the mic was working right, so I wanted to go and type it out, make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm not so sure about it. I don't know if there was I didn't, quite honestly, I didn't tie them together. So I didn't necessarily see it. Have you seen something in that area?
I primarily work with smaller businesses, consulting for companies that have really no more than 30 to 50 employees. I have interviewed with a couple larger businesses lately, and if you ask the right questions, you can get the answers you're really looking for. What I try to look for, whether I'm trying to bring on a new client or interviewing for, my next role, I want a results-oriented work environment.
Yep.
They care less about the input that you put in day to day, week to week, and they care more about the outcomes that all the work is kind of leading towards.
Yeah.
Since they can't have somebody manage a team on a day to day in the sense of, hands-on micromanaging, observing everything that's being done, they have to trust that the people are getting the work done, that they can reach those outcomes. Some of them are setting goals that are, I think, a little too short. They're going weekly, monthly goals.
Oof.
I think quarterly is kind of that sweet spot that a lot of companies really should focus on. So I do agree with you there. I was just curious about your experience working with the larger companies, if anything like that's changed on those scales.
Quite honestly, I haven't seen it, Tom. But raising that question, I think that's a really good question, and I'm going to pay a little more attention to see if there is some shift there, and if not, quite honestly, I think it would be a good shift.
Yeah.
If they focus more on outcomes. Most organizations, I got it. Most of the companies I'm working with, they're still looking at did you meet your velocity kind of challenges. So I'd say it's still probably more output focused, at least from an individual or small team perspective.
One of the questions that I do ask is, what framework are you currently practicing? Because most Agilists that I know, they're well respected. They're kind of agnostic to any one platform.
Yeah, I 100% agnostic. Don't care.
Yeah, as long as you're practicing some form of Agile and keeping true to whatever framework you do practice. The one that has drawn the most criticism, both good and bad, is probably SAFE.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm happy to talk about SAFe, especially over a beer.
Just finished mine, and I had one interview where all they asked were questions about SAFe, and the first thing I said was, I've never worked under their, like, I understand it, I know it in theory, but I personally never worked on it because, again, the companies I've worked with are smaller.
Yep.
But I do understand that larger companies like it because it allows that higher level manager to kind of keep their thumb, I don't say keep their finger on the pulse, keep their thumb on the dev team and what's being done. In
Yep.
my opinion, it's kind of counterintuitive to what you would.
So Tom, I agree with you, right? So let me say this, certainly for the Carlyle group, we never entertained SAFe, not once. They did actually bring a large consulting company in at one point in time, and they were talking about using the Spotify model, which would have been a terrible idea, right? You know, Spotify works great for Spotify. This is a private equity firm. They're not Spotify.
Right.
You know, there are ideas from Spotify which were awesome, and we can certainly use some of those ideas, and we did to a certain extent. But trying to make Carlyle Spotify would have been a huge mistake.
They're a very different business.
Some people, you know, read on the internet and they saw SAFe and said, hey, we should be doing this. But I think largely one of the main reasons a lot of organizations, this is Roy's personal opinion, right? That's, take it for what it is. I think a lot of the reasons that big organizations head towards SAFe is because it feels comfortable. You see a lot of the same practices that you would get in waterfall, and it feels comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they get value out of it, cool, go ahead and do it. You know, I typically don't recommend it for my clients, but that's just me. And there is absolute value in some of the concepts from SAFe. So I'm not trying to put it down in any way. It's just, there's value there, but you have to be very selective, right?
Because everybody else is using it too, or trying to.
And if they use it, it must be the right thing to do.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, just a couple of things on the prioritization. You don't have risk reduction or opportunity enablement. And the second thing is, how do you let the people figure out what urgency is?
Yeah. So so great point. So yes, cost of delay. If you look at the calculation, exactly, Ken, you know, and obviously you know this. You got risk reduction and opportunity enabler, things like that. So let me say it this way. So I tried using the formula with this company. And the CFO looked at it and said, I don't believe any of these numbers. How are you putting numbers to any of this stuff? And I said, well, actually, you're right. They're all fuzzy numbers. They're just relative to each other. They don't really mean much other than it's more or less than something else that's in your backlog. So he said, well, why the hell am I even doing this? Right? This doesn't make any sense to me. So I made the decision, in order to get at least something out of this organization, I dumbed it down to focus primarily on value, urgency, and the cost. That was something they could visually get a hold of and got behind. I would like to start bringing in more of the risk reduction and things like that, but they kind of build that into value to a certain extent. So risk reduction and opportunity enabler, they're kind of adding that into the value statement. Did that make sense, Ken? Yeah. Okay. And I'm sorry, you asked another question, Ken, and I forget what you asked me.
I was just going to say, how do they measure urgency?
Oh, urgency.
Yeah.
Thank you. So for them, urgency is often deadline driven. Right. So they've got regulations, they've got, end of life kind of activities with software, or they're eliminating some system, or they've got some vendor contract, or some investor has some kind of a date. So those are generally pretty easy for them to define because it's usually based on some kind of a hard date. Other things, a little bit fuzzier, obviously, like market opportunities, how urgent is it? It's a lot fuzzier,
So that leads me to ask, if you're going to talk about this later, but are they starting to talk about what I'll call real business agility, the ability to turn on a dime and refocus on some, well, you use the word new opportunity, that kind of thing. So you want to talk about it now? You want to talk about it later?
No, this is prioritization. Great place to talk about it, right?
Okay.
So they didn't necessarily use the phrase business agility, but they're following some of the practices. As an example, a new opportunity came up for the organization for a new area of business that they had not been in before. So instead of saying, well, let's go hire a vendor and let's figure out let's go get an extra $20 million or something to pay this vendor to build up this platform for us. Instead, they said, before we do that, let's take a look at our own internal capacity. And so they did deprioritize a bunch of work that they thought was less valuable than this new business opportunity. So they shifted away from something. Some of that was in flight too, and kind of annoyed some folks, but it was the right choice, right? It's a huge business opportunity. So they decided, let's shift some of that stuff down. Let's shift in some of this new work, at least the early stages, to better understand it from a Carlyle perspective, rather than bringing in a vendor who has absolutely no understanding of Carlyle. Let's at least do the initial understanding of that work and then decide if we should bring a vendor in to get us there faster.
Yeah.
Right.
So it sounds like they're addressing business agility. They're just not calling it that. They're calling it prioritization and things like that.
Yeah, and it's, obviously it's not 100%. They don't always do it. There is an inclination. Well, let's go hire Deloitte or hire whatever organization to help us bring this thing out. In some cases, that's actually the right thing to do, and that's okay. But at first they are at least having the conversation. Can we do this internally? What can we deprioritize? Is that the right choice for us? And then making an informed decision about, should we actually go spend the extra dollars? So they're heading down the right path. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, business agility, people throw that phrase out and mean lots of things. I guess I'll try to give it my definition, which is the ability to adapt very quickly to changed environments, to be very adaptive to a changed situation from the competitors, from the economy, from whatever, from COVID. So that's what I think of as business agility. Other people might define it a different way.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a great term, but yeah, absolutely agreed.
But anyway, okay.
All right, awesome. Any other questions? All right, now this is my favorite topic that I wanted to talk about tonight: measuring. I love data. I'm a big data fan. And I just wanted to call out specifically this quote from Deming: "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I love that quote. It may not actually, it's attributed to him, may not actually be his, but we'll just call it his for the sake of this. So we recognize that, and you should recognize in your organization, if you want real improvement, you got to have some data to back it up. If you want to have really important discussions about what to work on, where are we spending money, how do we improve, you got to have the data behind you to back that up. Be careful with that data, of course, because sometimes the data can be misleading. So we want to be very careful with this. But I'm a big data geek. I love statistics, so that I tend to go here. Now, the way that I like to use metrics is start out simple. If you feel that you have some kind of a challenge in front of you, set up some diagnostic metrics, measure that data, and then evaluate it, understand it, see if you need more data, and then maybe you need to add another metric. And that's what we did in this case. And it caused a really interesting thing to happen that I'm actually really proud of with this organization. So when we first started out, we put on some very basic metrics for each user story. So every user story that the team was working on, I wanted them to track one simple thing. What investment is this? What kind of an investment is this? Is this some strategic investment for some new future thing that we're implementing, a feature, something like that? Is it a break fix? And break fix was a very specific, the keep the lights on kinds of activities. In the past, break fix was just about anything that was not a project, right? Was plugged into break fix. So that was not really a good definition of break fix. It was a dumping ground, right? So we tightened up the definition of break fix to be very specifically production support and defects. And that's all it was, right? Everything else should in some way wind up in a roadmap if it was big enough, or we left an other kind of bucket category for those little things that just didn't quite fit as something strategic, like very small enhancements, little tiny requests, that kind of stuff. So we did give them an other bucket, which did get, of course, abused as we expected, but it was okay. It was within thresholds. We were all right with it. So I want to give an example of one particular area of the organization that this caused the biggest impact. So at the end, we fed this data into our annual budgeting process, and that's what was really interesting about this. So we had one particular organization, part of the organization, that was spending 65% on the strategic stuff. And by the way, we included technical debt in strategic. And I think that was an important delineation also. So that way it was technical debt was supposed to be on a roadmap, right? That was our goal. It was not getting the emphasis that it should, and still wasn't, even though things were showing up on a roadmap. You know how technical debt works, right? You're supposed to try to burn that stuff off, but it always gets trumped by new features, always, right? We accept that, but we wanted to drive the behavior of getting it on a roadmap, right? That was important to us. Not the little stuff, but the bigger chunks of things. So this one particular part of the organization, a very large part of the organization, was spending 65% of their capacity on strategic things. 30% of their capacity was being spent on break fix. Now, keep in mind, break fix was specifically production support and defects, right? That's a huge number just for that kind of activity. And then 5% for other stuff. So we got this very raw data, and we expected there to be within tolerable thresholds. It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was at least enough to pique some interest and allow us to drill down deeper. Well, when we drilled down deeper, we discovered with some additional data, they started tracking additional things after we got this data. Still 65%. We left that alone. That was okay. 20% was being spent on break fix, and 10% were spent on operational things like configuration changes, adding users, things that potentially could be self-service. So 10% of the capacity of the organization of this particular organization could likely have been shifted over with some self-service features built into the application. So there was an opportunity to save some operational cost. But the one that we really wanted to focus on was that 20%, the break fix space. Now, this was obvious. This was too big for this organization. And we didn't really have specific targets in mind. It was really just, it felt wrong, right? It felt big. So we dug in deeper and we discovered yet another problem. We asked a very specific question just to make them a little bit nervous. We asked them the question, so if we did absolutely zero strategic work, how much of your team would you need to keep? Now, they, of course, took that as we're going to get rid of people, right? And that was kind of intended. We wanted them to put them back on their heels a little bit to make them really think this through. Well, it turned out, and we drilled into this and got some additional data. It turned out in order to just keep the systems running, they needed 75% of their team, even though they were only spending 20% of their capacity. Well, these numbers didn't really add up. It didn't make any sense. And what it turned out was their teams weren't operating in a cross-functional way, right? They weren't cross-training. Each individual had a specific area, so they couldn't get rid of anybody, or the production systems would fall apart. Well, that's a problem, right? So we got two things out of this. First, we realized that there were some challenges in the teams. We needed to work on the cross-functional nature of the team. So got some more coaching involved and started cleaning those kinds of challenges up. That was pretty straightforward. But what we wanted to do is enable the organization to understand the value of technical debt. So if they spent more time fixing technical debt, they could potentially reduce the operational and the break fix. It turned out a lot of the break fix issues were interfaces failing, things that were potentially preventable, and defects. Obviously, we should be killing our defects, right? So technical debt and defects. So putting this in front of the CFO and showing them the dollars related to these kinds of things and how technical debt was impacting his part of the world, it allowed him to realize, I am spending way too much money on these systems being unstable. So we were able to convince the CFO in this particular one space anyway, to spend a minimum of a quarter focusing 75 to 80% of their capacity on nothing but technical debt and defects. So they deprioritized a whole bunch of strategic features that they could do without right now in favor of fixing the technical debt and making their platforms more stable, enabling some self-service activities so that they could start shifting their capacity more to the strategic work. So it was essentially a 1 quarter investment, maybe a little more than a quarter, a 1 quarter investment into stabilizing the systems and getting them prepared so they could refocus for future opportunities. All right. So I want to pause on that one. Any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, great presentation so far. Thank you. Was there a discussion or a level setting within the organization of the definition of technical debt?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. Absolutely, Dwight. And that was a real challenge. At first, technical debt is defects, and no. That's not the way it is. Technical debt is bad stuff. So for this audience, if you're unfamiliar with technical debt is different from defects. Defects are things that are causing an impact, right? They've got to be fixed because there's an impact in your system. Technical debt, I found it really interesting. I do a lot of work with PMI folks, PMPs that are retraining. There's all really cool stuff going on with the PMI right now. The PMI defines technical debt as deferring cost, which I find to be a really narrow erroneous definition of technical debt. Technically, they're kind of right in that you've intentionally elected or unintentionally elected to do something as a shortcut, let's call it that, to reduce the cost so that you can meet a date. That's generally what happens. So like, as an example, so if you're pressured, forced to a date, and you need to make that date, you might take shortcuts, hard code things, do things the wrong way, not follow standards. That causes technical debt. Your system could potentially become unstable. It's poor. You're not following coding standards, things like that. It is working. It's doing its job. And that's the difference with technical debt defects. It's working and doing its job, but you need to go back and fix it because it is potentially very fragile. So yet, Dwight, we absolutely had that conversation, especially with the teams, because they weren't certain what that was. It was a little bit fuzzy, but we also had that conversation. It was really cool to do it with their CFO. So he understood what technical debt was. And he was like, oh, well, that's really bad. Why did we take shortcuts? Because you pressured them into a deadline. That's why you took shortcuts. So let's go fix those because you caused it initially. So he realized that, yeah, we actually really need to fix these things. And I was just really happy. They actually, from the CFO level, they decided to invest in fixing their technical debt. So really what I want to get out of this is have you get out of this is this data, this kind of data is your friend. So measure this stuff, keep it simple when you start out. Otherwise you're going to get really bad data. If you put too much metrics on your team, they're going to be focusing more on the metrics than getting work done. So start out simple, get some data, analyze it, and then maybe drill deeper with your second pass, right?
So I got a question.
Sure, Ken.
How do you measure technical debt? And how do you know that you reduced it?
Yeah, well, there's a good question. So we actually have the teams. First, the teams need to understand what technical debt is, right? So let's start with there, right? So that's the important thing. But what we did was they're using Jira, right? As a lot of organizations are. We created an issue type of technical debt instead of user story. So for any technical debt items, they would create a technical debt item in their backlog, and we would burn that technical debt. So we are measuring it. I wouldn't say that it's perfect, because there's probably a whole bunch more technical debt that they're not aware of. But at least it's a starting point. And what we're basically doing with them is we're having them identify as much of the technical debt that they can figure out. Start with that. Okay. And give some story point estimates on it so we can kind of get an idea of how much technical debt that really is. And we're doing burn down charts on technical debt.
So is this more about technical debt that's been fixed or more about technical debt that's in the backlog?
Technical debt in the backlog to start. And then as we're fixing it, we're tracking it on burn charts. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's not perfect, but at least it gives us some indicator that we're going the right direction. And they do, once they get in there and they're working on some of these things, they discover more technical debt. So sometimes it'll burn up, and that's useful too, right? Because at least we can get some visual that we can see where, we've actually increased technical debt because we've discovered things. Does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah, but I mean, my one thing, because my one measure of technical debt is how much automation do you have around?
Yeah.
And that's an easy thing to test.
Yep, it is. So unfortunately, their automation is very low. And this is a big push this year. We're starting a whole DevOps initiative. It should have been started last year, but we're starting out and trying to get them to understand what automation is, because their view of automation in the past has been, well, we go hire some, India-based consulting firm to do user interface automation after the developers have done the release. It's like, that's not automation. It's not what we're talking about. So they need to get to a level of understanding and the commitment in the teams to do the automation. We've got that. And now we're doing the investment of actually, building out automation frameworks and things like that. They're woefully behind in that space. And they're starting to feel that burden as well. That was another thing with the team size. They have to do so much manual testing that that's another area. And we're working with the CFO to help him understand the value of the investment in automation as well.
Okay.
Right?
Let me know if you need help with that. That's my focus.
That's your space. Yep. I'm very aware that's your space, Ken. Absolutely. Yeah. 100% agreed. And that's a big investment that they need this year in order to at least, they've got some pockets of it, but it's not great. Right. So I may be reaching out to you, Ken. Thanks for that. All right. Any other questions?
This is Nancy. I just have a quick comment about the data.
Yeah.
and the metrics and all that, and really important things, because you know how important data is to helping make decisions. But I just have to share an experience.
Please.
I had recently, a bunch of us were called into a meeting because this big wig had his name or his organization on a chart showing something he didn't like. So we were all getting in there. It was all about shared servers and
Yeah.
the fact that there was some changes going in, and his team was flagged as being part of that change, but they didn't know about it. So he's
Mhm.
like, the whole purpose of the meeting was to get him off of this chart because it's not good to be on the chart.
Yep.
So the girl's like, well, we can remove your application as being on the server. And so all this gymnastics is being done. So this metric would show a certain way for this big important guy.
Yep.
And I didn't say much, but at the very end, another person said, well, probably important that we recognize the whole shared services and shared platform concept. And I said, you know what, that's the key takeaway here. It's not, and of course I didn't say this part. I didn't say it's not to get your organization off of this chart because you're afraid of what it shows, but it's a better understanding of how shared servers work, and actually the software and this chart is doing its job, because it's basically telling you have a vulnerability, or you at least should have an interest because you are on a shared server and your application may not be impacted, but it's telling you might want to look at it. So I just had to laugh when you said, how important, metrics is and how people are being measured by it. And they, but in this case, it was so funny because I thought to myself, we're all sitting here to get his little organization off a chart, but it's actually more, it's doing the right thing. It's giving you information that you should be actually using. So anyway, that was just my 2 cents I wanted to share.
Thanks for sharing that. And what I would love the organization, this and all the other organizations I work with, is to get to a point to celebrate that kind of data, right? If something is showing red, that should be a good thing because you're recognizing there's a problem to solve, and then you do something about it, right? That's a very positive thing. Unfortunately, it's, oh, you're red, you're in trouble. That's not where we really should be, right? But unfortunately, that's kind of the way it works. One of the things I did with this organization is I hate the whole RAG status thing. Red, yellow, green kind of not. I hate it. It's just not a very good indicator of what's going on. One of the first things I did with them, as I said, okay, all their projects that you're currently doing right now, we're going to make all of them red. Every single project, we're going to turn every single one of them red. And then our goal would be to get it to green, right? And then getting to green does not mean that you're going to do gymnastics to get there. It simply means that you're going to continually reduce your risk until you can honestly say there's no more risk, and no more risk means you're green. So I wanted to change the behaviors. They're not 100% there. There's still a little bit of fighting going on when something looks negative, but they are much, much better than they used to be. They're not viewing it as such a negative thing anymore, which is a real positive thing to get to. All right. Let's move on. Okay, let's talk about some next steps. So not even close to done. Lots and lots of stuff to do. And they've had some setbacks, as most organizations do. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So the big thing that we've got to work on this year is DevOps. It's a big gaping hole, and it's something that needs to happen. More automation. Ken, this goes back to your, specifically calling this one out as a major, major hole in the organization. Improved deployment speed. There are still groups in the organization that can't deploy faster than, several days in order to deploy something. And that's just not acceptable. It should be a push of a button, as close as possible anyway, to get things out the door. So the cost of deployment is incredibly expensive right now, and they need to work on that. The cost of getting things to production is still also very expensive. So getting even to the point where you can release is expensive. So the investment is worth it to reduce all that cost. So we also want to focus on more automation, automated quality techniques, right? Things like that. So automated testing, just the whole space and quality in general. We have actually come a really long way with the quality space. It started out a little over a year ago, where quality was a separate organization. They had a QA organization, and we got rid of it, right? So QA is no longer a separate organization. They're not a group of offshore folks that test the product. Instead, quality is built into every team, and quality is not just a collection of testers. Quality is the developers, the analysts, the testers. QA is embedded as a mindset in every single team. Automation, we expect to do the exact same thing. Automation is not done by a separate team, although there are, of course, shared services from automation, but the team should be responsible for enabling its own automation and things like that. So distributed QA, there are still standards. There's a QA community of practice that we're building out to make sure that we understand how to test and what good QA practices are. But QA is a mindset and not just a practice. Moving down, we need to continue to improve the prioritization schemes. Still not great, but it's a lot better than it was in the past. It continued to improve the budget process, moving to a quarterly planning process instead of annual. Hopefully that will help to resolve a lot of those challenges. And we want to improve the QBR process, the quarterly business reviews. Right now, they're still a little more focused on the work that's being done and less focused on the goals and objectives that are coming up and how to evolve quarter to quarter. So we need to improve that process as well. But we're starting to make some headway there. Continue on. We want to do things smaller, right? So right now, a lot of the teams are still working in like quarterly increments. Their releases are not fast enough. We want to get that down much smaller. But some teams are really doing great and they can release every day. Some teams can't do that. Most teams can't. So we want to get to a place where they can release more frequently, but that brings us back to our DevOps conversation and automation conversation. We're going to get some more metrics. So we want to do more measurements on the teams. We're rolling out, which we should have rolled out much earlier. We're going to be rolling out team health surveys this year. So we're going to be tracking how the teams are improving on a maturity index, a maturity scale, and do quarterly surveys to make sure the teams are continuing to mature. And it's not just the teams; it's also the organization around the teams, the support mechanisms, business involvement, that sort of thing. So that's all going to be part of the business survey, or some of the health survey. Now we're not in that case. We are not actually going to be using some third-party tool. We've built our own survey. We're doing it internally rather than spend thousands and thousands of dollars for the big tools. It's a simple survey to do, and we'll evolve the survey over time. That's what we elect to do in this case. Nothing wrong with those tools. They're great. They work. We decided to keep it internal to keep the cost down. Okay, so another one, continue to work the balance of operations and strategic work. This is an ongoing battle, obviously. There's always a tendency to dip into that peanut butter layer that I talked about. So we need to make sure that we put up the right firewalls and get the business folks to truly understand the value of this. They're getting better, but there's still a tendency to dip into it. And of course, keep getting better. All right, let's talk a little bit about our retrospective. Things that worked, things that didn't. We do retrospectives as part of our Agile COE as well. So some things that worked really well for us. Using the data was fantastic. We got some fantastic results out of it, better than I expected. So I'm really pleased with the way they handled that. More business involvement, but we've done a great job with that. The business folks are involved, they're engaged. They're using Agile terms, which is awesome. So they're really getting into it. We did a lot better at working on the right stuff. Still not perfect, but we're doing much better at it. The really cool thing is seeing the terminology being embedded in the conversation. So we've got folks like the CFO, the COO. They're using things like value stream. They're using words like objectives and the right terms. Now, what we want to start doing though is we want to stop dropping the conversation of Agile. We've started doing this. It's not about Agile. Now we want to start shifting them more toward just improving and stop using the word Agile. It's getting very tiresome. People are getting tired of hearing the word Agile. So we want to drop it from the lexicon, right? That's kind of our goal. Just drive some better behaviors. Another thing that works incredibly well was contractor conversions. It was never the intent to get rid of all of the contractors, never the intent to remove anybody or lose a job or anything, simply to reduce the contractor to employee ratio and have more stable teams and get rid of the behavior of, I can't train that person, they're a contractor, they should come pre-trained. That's a common problem, but shouldn't be, right? We would prefer you train contractors like everybody else, but you can understand there's a dollar, it's a budget thing, right? But that's going really well as well. It's a little bit slow, but not so bad. Okay, things didn't go so great. The annual budgeting process was, in my opinion, really difficult, more difficult than it should have been. It evolved into more project discussions, and we want to not let that happen again. There was some difficulty in letting go of budgets. There was some infighting, some politics involved where, what do you mean I'm not getting as much money? Well, it's not about getting as much money. You're still producing. You still have a job. It's not about that. It's not about the dollars. but we know how that works. There's a lot of behavior involved, a lot of psychology and ownership in the dollars. If I'm control of a multi-million-dollar budget, I'm important, right? So we're taking that away. They feel that they're losing importance. So there was some struggle there. Discomfort with the fuzzy numbers, the ambiguity of the numbers, especially in the finance space. There was a desire to track every hour, track every dollar, and we spent a lot of time convincing the finance folks that it doesn't matter. It's all a bunch of lies anyway. So it's
yeah, they definitely want to hear that.
they really didn't want to hear it, but in their heart of hearts, they knew it was true. They just didn't want to hear that. It's like, what do you mean? They're not working an hour. No, they're not working an hour on that project. They're billing that project because they ran out of dollars over here. Right. So that's the reality of how all that stuff works. So a little bit of discomfort with that, but they're starting to get more comfortable with the fuzziness. Big resistance at being measured, especially on the business side. Adding those KPIs to the business outcomes was a bit difficult. The first KPIs they put in place were, we're going to improve by 20%. Well, improve what? Right? How are you going to measure what you're improving? How do you know what that actually means? So they tried to be as abstract as possible, and we just didn't allow that to happen. So that was really difficult to get there. But they're starting to understand that it's not, if you don't meet this specific number, you're going to get in trouble. It's more, this is your goal. This is your target. Let's go toward these things. And if you're close, awesome. You're moving the needle, which is really all we care about, right? Okay, some things we learned. It's not about Agile. It's not about Agile. It started that way, and that's a good way to get the hook, good way for organizations to realize that there are better ways of doing things. But Agile itself is not the goal. It's not about, doing Agile. It's about becoming an Agile organization, Kaizen culture, those kinds of things. And that's really what we're trying to instill. If you build the environment, build the culture, then Agile is just enabled by all of that, right? And Agile are the frameworks and the practices to get you there, or a philosophy to get you there. So we have learned also that over time, and we've been doing this for, a little over a year now, Agile is becoming tiresome. People don't want to hear about it anymore. So the more we talk about it, the more you're starting to see eye rolls. So we move away from those words. I don't care what you call it anymore. This is the culture and what the direction that we want to go. So they're still doing it, but we just don't talk about it as much, and it's having a positive impact. Another big lesson this was the same lesson I had this on in the last one, but I think this one bears repeating. Some teams have to fail. It's okay to let them fail, not big failures. The teams do need to discover what they're doing wrong, and you can tell them and tell them and tell them. Sometimes you just got to let them fail. And I think that one was worth repeating from my last presentation.
Okay. Go
ahead.
Let me stick this in. So you mentioned the Kaizen culture, but I didn't see, at least in the way that I might have expected, talking about how the individual teams are improving themselves, and how we can measure to some degree that they have improved themselves, like in a simplistic way, by improved velocity or whatever. But
so there are some simple things.
Do we feel that the teams are improving themselves?
Yes, they are definitely improving themselves. We started out with some pretty simple metrics for that. And this is my personal philosophy, how to start teams out in the right direction. I like to start with using quality metrics as a starting place.
Mm-hmm.
So they're measuring things like escape defects, and they're starting to measure automated test cases, things of that nature. So that my intent with starting with quality metrics is I don't want them to focus on speed over quality. I want them to start with quality, maintain that quality, and then increase the other metrics, the value of the other metrics along the way. So I started them out with quality, and then I wanted them to focus on predictability. So we're in the Scrum teams, we're focusing a little bit now on committed versus completed, not as a target, but just as a guide. Are you getting more predictable? That's what we're looking for, in the trend of predictability. So the approach that I use, this is just Roy's personal direction, right? Start with quality, move to predictability, and then I start focusing on other things like speed and those kinds of things. But we also do track value kind of indirectly. That's more of a business thing, and we track that more at an epic level than at a story by story level.
But do you get a sense that they feel proud of themselves in terms of making themselves better?
Yeah, there in many of the cases, not necessarily all of them. There's still some behaviors that we want to try to adjust, obviously, but a lot of the teams are starting to feel really good that they're improving. We're looking at the trend lines, and they can see it going up. We're less focused on individual data points. We're just focusing on the trends. Are you getting better or worse in
Okay,
certain
so,
areas?
and then, my other concern is I think of it as a quality metric, but you could disagree. Are the teams happier?
Yeah, actually, they really are. They're really enjoying it. There's, again, still some pockets where there may still be pressured for, unnecessarily for dates. And that one's really kind of funny. Some of the teams are pressuring themselves to meet a date.
Yeah.
Even when their senior leadership is saying, I don't care about that date. They feel that they are committed to a date. And that's that old behavior they just can't get rid of.
Yep.
So in those cases, they're still not happy, right? Because they're so focused on the stinking date, right? And even though it doesn't make any difference, they're pressuring themselves and they're working crazy hours to meet an artificial date. It's insane. But in those other teams that have started adopting the philosophy, they're actually really happy with it because they're feeling less pressured. They're spending more time having fun. There's, serious fun, right? That concept. They're spending more time just improving as a team and talking as a team and socializing. And especially now with the pandemic, that opportunity to socialize as a team is really important. And they're enjoying those opportunities, certainly in the retrospectives and the dailies.
Awesome. Okay, so here's one more that just occurred to me.
Yeah.
Which is it has the notion behind it that people can only change so much per day, per quarter, per week, per year.
Yeah.
So are we changing as fast as we can change?
That's almost like saying, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck, right?
Yeah.
That's a hard one to answer.
So what do you think?
Yeah. So I think they're going, for the most part, on average, I think they're going at the right level. Some teams are pushing themselves harder than I think they really should. And some
I didn't mean necessarily at the team level. I meant at the macro level,
at the organizational level,
the whole gestalt, everything.
Considering that they've only been doing this in earnest for about a year, I think they're going faster than I expected. Okay. My concern is that now and I wanted to talk about this one too. They're starting to bring in some new blood.
Okay.
And so they're making some mistakes with some of the new blood that they're bringing in, and I think that's going to set them back a bit.
Okay.
That kind of goes to let me just cover very quickly that last things that we could do better.
Okay, please.
So one of the things, just like we were just talking about measure teams earlier, right? I think we could have done a better job with that, a much better job. We should have started the health surveys much earlier, but we didn't. And now we're finally rolling them out. And that'll be another trend that we can track. How happy are the teams? That's going to be part of the survey, those kinds of things. So we'll be able to start getting, more, we call it subjective nature. It's a survey, right? But we'll be getting more data related to that. The next bullet point is the one that I'm really concerned about. And that's the HR hiring criteria. They've got some new blood coming in, and the way that they're hiring people really hasn't changed since prior to the transformation. So they're bringing in they are bringing in some very senior leadership that may not necessarily have a good understanding of what Agile is all about. And in one case in particular, it was a surprise to this person that they're even doing Agile.
Oh,
so that can cause some very negative things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the concerns. So we're starting a very concerted effort to help HR understand better how to hire people and what to look for, put out the job descriptions, make sure the right keywords are out there so that we don't run into challenges where somebody comes in and causes resistance, right? Because now we have the chance of backsliding and we don't want to do that. So that is a major concern, and that's something I think we can do better. The reason I brought that up, Joe, was related to your question. Are they going fast enough? Yes, but I fear they're going to backslide a bit now. Yeah. So that's what I want to be careful of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then finally, rolling budgets is another thing. I think we could do a lot better with that, and that's what we're going to start doing very soon. So hopefully that will improve, improve us in the future. All right, final slide. Just to wrap all this up, I want to just reiterate, Agile's not our goal, right? Agile is a way of us getting there. It's a tool in the toolbox to help us. The real benefit that we get out of Agile is not just the practices, but how they drive behaviors and the philosophies and the mindset behind them. So if you're doing Scrum, awesome. If you're doing Kanban, awesome. That's fantastic. That's step one. Right? What you need really to get to is the culture, the behaviors. That's really where you're going to get the really significant changes. I've seen it happen so many times, and many of you on this call have seen it as well. You start out doing those practices, using the frameworks, and you hit your head against the organization. The organization doesn't change, and now great, you're doing waterfall using Scrum. So you're really not doing yourself any benefit there. You're not getting the return from Agile that you really should be expecting. You're not going to go dramatically faster. You're not going to get more fun environments if you're not changing the culture along with it. And that's really what I want to get to. Now, I also want to make sure that this presentation doesn't become a, hey, this is the Carlyle model. That is not our goal, right? It is not the Spotify model. This is not the Carlyle model. Please don't do that. This is what's working for Carlyle. And that's awesome. It works great for them. Your situation is likely going to be different. Take some ideas that you find are interesting, experiment and see if they work for you and see where that goes, right? So we've had fun doing it. We've had some good successes, but maybe you can get some value from it as well, right? Another tip to work with is start with your goals. And many organizations, another one of my clients that I'm working with is really good at starting projects with no problem statement, right? Let's go build something. Well, why are we building it, right? Let's start with the why, and then you're going to get a lot better at building the right stuff. So with a lot of my clients, I run problem statement workshops where we define the problem first, and then we decide if we need a project to do anything about it. So start with that, right? And that's really going to help your organization as well. Measure what matters. Don't measure everything, right? Big mistake. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean you should, right? So start with measuring the things that matter right now and let your metrics evolve. And don't be afraid to get rid of metrics when they've lost their usefulness, right? Otherwise, you're just building more and more metrics and you're spending a lot of time tracking those metrics that aren't really giving you any value anymore, right? So don't be afraid of getting rid of useless metrics. They'll eventually just get gamed anyway, so they're going to lose value. So get rid of things that don't make any sense. I'm a big fan of data, as I've said multiple times. I like to use data wherever possible to get past emotional discussions. Like if you feel you need more people, you're out of capacity, you need more people, don't just go to your managers and say, hey, I need more people. They're going to say, prove it, right? Why do you need, work better, right? Work smarter, bring data, right? What does your data say? Why do you need more capacity? Is it that it's a capacity problem, or are we, being over prioritized? We're being forced to go over our capacity. So maybe the discussion isn't about more people. Maybe the discussion is reduce the multitasking and reduce the workload on the team, right? So give that some consideration. And that's why I like to bring the data, right? This is just me. This is how I like to do things, but you will obviously have some of your own experiences. All right, last part of our session. I would love it if you could leave us, a quick little word about what you thought about the presentation. You can go back to your poll if you'd like to. I appreciate it just to see what your thoughts are. We've got a little bit of time. Any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Hey, Roy, this is Gary Evans. I don't have my picture up there, but
Yeah.
I really want to thank you for what you've shown us. I especially want to thank you for the idea of simple metrics. I'm currently working with a state organization. I've got 9 teams.
Yeah.
And I've got 4 Scrum Masters, and I'm the coach.
Oof.
And after 8 months of, well, pretty much about 6 months of my doing all the metrics, because I have certain metrics that I use all the time.
Yep.
I charged all of the Scrum Masters to come up with their own simple metrics. I said, just pick 2, but make sure that they're going to be useful.
Yep.
Every single one of them after 2 sprints. These aren't very useful. I said, yep. Let's try your 2.0 version next.
Yep.
Because they adopted what was in Jira.
Mm-hmm.
One guy picked a cumulative flow diagram, and he could not explain how to read the 2 axes on a CFD.
Awesome.
But it was in Jira, right?
Yeah.
So
it's got to be good.
Very, very simple metrics so that you can throw them away.
Yeah.
You can inspect and adapt. There's no huge cost, and there's almost no overhead, but we have to have some kind of measure.
You got to
because it's not the numbers. I could not care less what velocity is.
Nope.
I care about the trend.
Yep.
As we make changes, I want to know if things are getting better or they're getting even worse. It's the trend that is important. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Gary, absolutely agree with everything you just said there, right? And it's really difficult often to convince management that that's what you're really looking for. They want to say, what's the velocity for this sprint? Well, why was it below the last sprint? Who cares?
Who cares?
It doesn't matter. The team should be identifying if there are impediments or maybe they've just maybe somebody was sick. Who knows? It doesn't make any difference. It's the average. It's the trend you want to follow.
And that's where
if they're improving.
That's where the root cause analysis comes in. We want to be able to do the RCA so that we understand what the trends, reasons are. but the numbers by themselves are neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. The numbers don't really mean anything. It's how they relate to previous experience. Exactly right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for this, for what you've put together here.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I had a question. After you've done the value and everything at the business level, do the teams know what that value is?
Yeah. Yeah. What they do is they're doing the value. All right. So I'm gonna put a statement out there. Unfortunately, we're using Jira. Without the plugins to go and, like the higher level. So we've got epics and stories, and that's about it. So at least at the epic level, there's actually there are a couple of attributes that we added to the epic. So the teams can absolutely see what the value proposition is for each one of these. So it's 100% transparent. It's open to the teams. It's open to everybody who should be looking at the data. There's some things obviously they do need to, kind of like firewall, but for the most part, wide open, transparent stuff. So yes, the teams do see that information. And Ken, that's a great question because it's really important that they do see it.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say the same thing, but say it differently. Do the teams feel motivated to produce each release and can explain why they're excited to do it?
Yeah, largely yes, because what we're really trying to get them to do and get better at this, because they still need to improve in this, and they'll always need to improve, is to explain the why, right? To give that kind of purpose behind the value that they're building. They're still not great. Often they get boring business terms that don't really mean a lot to the people doing the work. But we're really encouraging them. One thing that I like to encourage with my business folks is, as I say, there should be a feeling, right? If with your problem statements, with your value statements, there should be a feeling related to it. So what's the feeling that you want to convey with this? So your teams can feel what they're part of and get behind it. So they're getting better at it. And when they're really good at it, and there are pockets that they're awesome, especially in like the marketing spaces, right? Those people that are used to the feeling, the emotional aspect, they're really good at it. So those teams are like, oh, cool, this is what I'm doing. And they feel really energized by it. In other areas, all right, so I have to improve this by 10%. And it's boring. Right. So that's kind of a yes and no statement, Joe.
Yeah.
Right.
So
at least
go
ahead.
The teams actively look at the stories and going, okay, can I cut this down? Can I cut stuff off? Do I not have to do all of that? Do they have a lot of that sort of?
Yeah, pretty active conversations with their product owner, and they've done a really good job with their product owners after some trial and error. That they have actual business representatives. They did their best to reduce the extra overhead on the product owners, so they have more time to dedicate with the teams. It's not perfect yet, but it's a lot better. There was some trial and error because sometimes they got product owners that were the wrong people, and they did have to make some adjustments there early on, which you'd expect. But yeah, they do have pretty good open, honest conversations about that. It's like let's talk about what we don't have to do, and that's a pretty regular occurrence.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. Cool. Any other comments or questions?
As you kept going, I thought you were gonna, kind of make me have fewer questions. We've got to get a beer at some point because I've got maybe another 30 minutes worth. I'll send you a 4-pack.
Sweet. No PBRs. I don't drink PBRs.
That's fine. I trust me. One, I wanted to point out a buddy of mine put a question in the chat. What's the number one way to determine if a team is happy?
So I use a couple of different techniques. The first thing is to ask them. Have a conversation with them. That's where it all starts.
No, you wouldn't want to ask them, would you?
Yeah. Oh no, that team is happy. I know they're happy. Don't do that. So I use a couple of different indicators. One I use happiness index is an indicator. As long as the team is comfortable and that they're being honest and open about it, happiness index can be useful. And that's just 0 to 5 anonymous. How happy are you with your specific whatever? That can be useful. I sometimes use Nico, which is like a mad, sad, glad every day. So you can kind of see a biorhythm of the feelings of the team. And that can be useful for a few things. You can kind of trend it out to see the happiness, satisfaction of the team, but you can also kind of tailor it or tie it to specific events that might have happened. So if the whole team goes down on a day, let's drill into that. What happened? Was there some event that might have dragged the team downward a little bit? So that can be pretty useful. But I also do it in the surveys. I ask them things like, if there's something that you could do to improve your life, what would it be? Things like that. So it's a key to that is often teams feel that they don't have any control over their happiness and they need management to step in. And we really want to encourage the team to recognize what they can do themselves to improve their happiness. And there's a lot, right? So I know that's kind of high level, Tom, but it's really hard to judge true happiness. It's very subjective, right?
Right. I did have two more, but I'm going to ask the one that I think is more relevant because you just made the comment of you had to remove some product owners from some of the teams because they weren't a good fit.
Yeah.
What about them if there's like a general overarching theme made them unfit to be a PO?
Oh boy, a few things. Command and control, big one. No leadership qualities. That's another one.
None.
Not having enough time to do the job, and not willing to let go of their previous job, not wanting the job. Right. A lot of times they say, well, you're this career path, I've chosen this career path. Well, guess what? Now you're a product owner. Well, that's not going to fit. Right. That's a completely different career path. So those are some of the key things to look out for, not understanding what the job is, and even after being told going, you know what, I don't want that job. Right. So
like,
those are some of the key.
Anyways.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Another client is going through that right now. They selected people as product owners and said, you're a product owner, and never give them any training to tell them what the job is. Hey, success. That's going to work.
And it sounds like they also didn't give them a choice. They didn't ask them.
They really didn't
want to do it.
They really didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're dealing with the side effect, which is teams that are unhappy.
And if I got time for one more, you did mention earlier one of the slides how you wish they do more to change the overall hiring process.
Yeah.
Is there anything like any one or 2 points that stand out in their current process that they could change, and what would they change about that?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge, especially in the IT space, is hiring just on skill set, right? So you got Java, I'll hire you, right? You scored whatever on this test. So Java, you are a right fit. That's secondary. What we really should be looking for is your soft skills. Can you work as a team member? Or, what do you do in this situation? How do you handle conflict? Are you willing to speak up? Are you willing to be honest? Those kinds of things. If they can't do that, I don't care how good you are as a developer, you're going to stink as a team member.
Mm-hmm.
So, focus on that. You can teach Java, right? That's stuff that people can learn. Maybe it costs a little bit more to get them there, but at least you're not going to destroy your team if you bring somebody in that doesn't fit well.
Right.
So that's what I want them to focus on the soft skills, right?
Tell me which of your past clients you've done that for, because I'm going to send them a couple applications.
Sweet. I can't name
Sign
names.
right in.
One will be Tom and the other will be Thomas, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
I know Roy. maybe not throw the name out there, but yeah.
So do you get much of a chance to speak with David Rubenstein?
David Rubenstein.
Yeah.
Sure.
At
Carlyle.
Oh, okay. Sorry. What didn't somebody say that we have brain farts? That was mine. No, so I don't get to speak too much to David. I know who he is, but no, I don't get much opportunity. I deal mostly. I don't know if you know Kurt. He's the CFO. I spent a lot of time with him. I spent a lot of time with their COO, and a huge amount of time with Hisham, which is the Agile COE lead.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't really spoken too much with David.
I only know of David because he's a fellow classmate, and I'll be seeing him. I'll be seeing him in April at our virtual reunion.
Awesome. That's fantastic. That's very cool. Any other questions? I know we're at time.
We're at time. Thanks so much, Roy. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
And
very much.
Dwight, are you still there?
I am here.
Okay. So Dwight's going to be, did we set a date, Dwight? I think we did, right? For next month.
The 11th.
Yes. Okay, good. And remind us of the topic.
What are some of the trends we're seeing that are influencing, if I could speak, the future of work?
Okay. And okay. I think that opens up all of Pandora's box.
It does.
Okay, so we'll be talking about that in it's exactly a month, isn't it?
March 11th, you said, March 11th,
Yep.
March 11th, and today is
February.
February 11th.
February 11th, so it's exactly 28 days from today. Even I can count that far. Okay, so very good. Thank you, Dwight, and we look forward to it. Good to see everybody. Have a good evening. Be safe. Don't get too wet if you're in the Charlotte area. But thanks for coming. Thank you, Roy. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Thank you,
Take care,
Roy.
all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So much.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
I sent you a few emails. I'm not sure if you've gotten them. Is the best way to get to you through Kathy?
No. Email to me is, I mean, it depends on what it is. You can contact Kathy also on certain things.
Yeah, no, it was about the presentation next month.
Yeah. Okay. I will get in contact with you tomorrow.
Okay.
I should, this is more personal information than you really want to know, but I got my second vaccine yesterday and I was feeling like, I can't say the phrase that I
You
want to
can.
say, but you know what I mean? I wasn't feeling good. And,
Right.
and I think by tomorrow morning, I'll be feeling differently and better. I feel actually better already compared to the way I was feeling this morning. So I should have a little bit of time to talk at least briefly tomorrow afternoon and talk about your issues. I don't recall, I mean, I get a lot of emails, so sometimes they go,
Yeah.
so I apologize if that happened, but I'll look for your email and then we can talk tomorrow.
Okay, I hope you feel better, and thanks for hosting tonight, even though you were feeling bad. That's
I'm better now than I was this morning. This morning I would have been going like,
yeah.
But I am feeling better. But anyway, good to see you, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Thanks, Joe.
Sure. Cheers.
See you.